Let's get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Adam Kaufman. I lead industry go-to-market globally at Snowflake. I'm super excited to be with all of you today at re:Invent. I am fortunate enough to have not lost my voice. I know several of you were out rather late last night. Hopefully you're having a good time. I do want to kick things off by just saying thank you to AWS. It's a great opportunity and honor to be up here. And we actually won, as Snowflake, AWS's Partner of the Year for data and analytics. And so I think that it's really been a great opportunity to be here and receive that award. So in terms of the session that I've got for today, we should have a really good hour ahead of us. I've got two executives here from two of our Snowflake customers, Petco and Siemens. They're going to join me on the stage in a little while, and hopefully really valuable session for all of you to understand exactly how different organizations are thinking about their data journey, particularly given the trends that are coming in terms of generative AI and large language models. So for the next hour, what I have planned here, I'm going to start off with just a brief overview of Snowflake for those of you who might not be too familiar with who we are. From there, I'm going to welcome on our two executives, and we'll see how we do on timing. If we have some time, we'll have some Q&A. If not, we've agreed to stay afterwards if you want to talk to us, if you have any specific questions after the session. And then you're always welcome to reach out to us via LinkedIn if you want to chat about any of the topics that we touch upon today. All right, so for some background, before my personal transition to a career in technology, I actually worked in industry, and my last role was driving the international business for a multinational life sciences company. And in that role, I experienced firsthand the challenges around having access to the data that I needed to make decisions. And I think a lot of these kind of challenges are going to be familiar to the audience here. One was that the data was heavily siloed, and this was exacerbated by the fact that the company had been through a lot of M&A, and we had acquired a ton of technical debt along with that, and we never fully integrated the systems as we went through the M&A. The next challenge was the fact that the data was stale, and it was really hard to reconcile. And then the final challenge was that any external data that we tried to incorporate into our analysis just required an enormous amount of transformation in order to make the data useful. And so all of these challenges led to the fact that we either delayed our decision-making or at the worst, made decisions with suboptimal data. And at Snowflake, all of this changes. And at Snowflake, I've had the opportunity to talk to customers like Siemens, like Petco, and in my role in terms of running the industries, having to talk to customers across all the different verticals about how they are using data as an asset, how they're using data to generate new revenue streams by actually monetizing their own information, and how they're using information to collaborate more closely, not only internally, but also with their customers and partners and suppliers. And so for the goal for today is I would like all of you to hear from two executives around their own experiences driving the transformation within their organizations. Now, Snowflake's mission is to mobilize the world's data. And what that means is that we are constantly working to break down data and technology silos. And it's also about having access, secure access to near limitless amounts of information and being able to collaborate internally and externally, regardless of your underlying cloud platform. Now, 2 years ago, we set out to launch industry-specific data clouds. And to date, we've launched 7 industry data clouds, including financial services, retail and consumer goods, media, entertainment and advertising, healthcare and life sciences, manufacturing, and education and government. And our intent was and continues to be providing the most industry-relevant solutions, partners, applications, and data to our customers specific to their business. Now, I think all of you are aware that insights are only as good as the data that informs it. And this has never been more true than what's happening now. This new wave of generative AI and large language models really has the potential to transform or revolutionize all of our businesses. And though we're just starting to really explore how to deploy generative AI and what type of use cases are going to be most relevant to each of our different businesses, at Snowflake, we really see 3 core themes emerge around this new wave of AI. First is leveraging generative AI and large language models to generate new insights from your organization's data, whether that data is structured, semi-structured, or unstructured, and make that done quickly and easily. Next is around leveraging the power of large language models to enhance business productivity. And this is in ways like automating SQL code generation or data insights, or empowering data and application discovery within the Snowflake marketplace. And then finally, it all comes down to a core foundation of governance. Your organization's data is your most important asset, and securing and governing that data is crucial. And with Snowpark Container Services, you can deploy the latest large language models in your Snowflake account, never moving or exposing your data outside of Snowflake. Now let's talk a bit about collaboration. The Snowflake Data Cloud empowers your most critical data workloads, and those workloads include things like data warehousing, data lakes, data science, data engineering, cybersecurity workloads, application workloads. But we also drive seamless collaboration, and that is collaboration within and between your organizations that's across your different business units, and that's your ecosystem of partners, customers, and suppliers, again, regardless of the underlying cloud platform. We also, however, drive seamless collaborate. I wanted to touch upon what that actually means from a collaboration perspective. And so this slide actually is one of my favorite kind of ways to show the amount of collaboration that has exploded within the data cloud over the past several years. So what you're looking at are 2 snapshots in time of the Snowflake Data Cloud. So one snapshot is from 3 years ago, and the most recent one is from earlier this year. And what you're looking at is every dot representing an actual Snowflake customer. And the lines in between the dots, whether those are one-to-one or one-to-many, these represent data collaboration points, or what we refer to as stable edges, between customers. And so this explosion of collaboration, the main point here is that this is not sharing of files via email. There is no FTP. There is no APIs. This is a secure and governed collaboration point between 2 or more organizations, again, powered by the Snowflake Data Cloud. So let's talk a bit about partners. Partners extend the Snowflake Data Cloud, and partners are building applications, they're distributing and monetizing data, and they're extending the capabilities of the Snowflake Data Cloud to other customers in their industry-specific clouds. And so what I have here, I've zoomed in on one of those 7 industry data clouds. This is the financial services data cloud. And this data cloud actually includes over 1,800 Snowflake customers today in the financial services industry. So these are banks, they're insurance companies, they're asset management firms. In addition to our customers, it includes our partners, partners that are distributing and monetizing data, like Refinitiv, like FactSet, like S&P Global. It includes partners that are building applications on the Snowflake Data Cloud. So that's like Aladdin by BlackRock, State Street Alpha, and what was announced earlier this week is Fusion by JP Morgan. And then it also includes our systems integrator partners like EY, Deloitte, Accenture, that are building industry solutions, all powered by the Snowflake Data Cloud. So with that introduction, I know it's quite brief, I would love to welcome Yush from Petco and Christian from Siemens onto the stage, and we'll transition to the discussion format of this presentation. Hi, good to see you. Hey. Hey. All right, good. Excellent. All right, so I would love to start off, when I think about Petco or Siemens, I'm personally familiar, but I don't think everybody in the audience necessarily understands the size or the scope of your organizations. So I would love to just start off with an introduction and hear from you a bit about your organization as well as your role within the organization. So with that, Christian, I would love to start with you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you a lot. Thanks for having me. So I'm Christian, I'm working for Siemens. I'm responsible for the Siemens Data Cloud, which is our data and AI platform ecosystem. I'm based in Munich, Germany, and well, Siemens itself, it's one of the largest manufacturing companies worldwide with more than 300,000 employees. We have many different lines of business, starting from Siemens Digital Industries, taking care of factory automation, for example. We have Siemens Smart Infrastructure, taking care of smart buildings. We have Siemens Mobility for the rail business, and of course also some other business lines like Siemens Financial Services, but also Siemens Healthineers taking care of medical solutions. So overall, we are a global manufacturing company. Our CEO says we are a technology company, which is definitely true, following the same, let's say, vision as Snowflake has, becoming data-driven and work in a new way with data. And yeah, myself, I'm responsible in the data and analytics department for the data and AI platform ecosystem.
Excellent. Piyush.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the warm introduction. Hey guys, my name is Piyush Sengal. I head the enterprise data engineering platform and architecture for Petco. I've been very fortunate to work across multiple industries, some of the biggest Fortune 500 like American Express, NBC Universal, Pernod Ricard, etc. In my current role, my team oversees 5 different data tasks, such as your big data, data integration, data platforming, data operations, and data architecture. Going back to Petco, we have been in existence from 1960s, so been there for 70, 80 years now. One of the biggest pet retail company in North America, have more than 25,000 plus employees within US and some of them in Mexico, Puerto Rico. In terms of our presence, we have more than 1,500 brick and mortar stores, added by strong e-commerce presence as well.
Excellent, thank you. So let's start off, both of you have been customers for some time. I would love to just kick things off with your journey with Snowflake so far. So perhaps we start off with you, Yush, and tell us about how long you've been a Snowflake customer and what your journey has been to date.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey has been quite fascinating. I have been with Snowflake for almost like 8 years, starting from NBCU. We at Petco moved our on-prem instance from Netezza to Snowflake back in 2018. It was a big migration. We are talking about maybe 300-400 terabytes of data moving from on-prem to cloud. It took us, I would say, 9 months to 14 months in total to complete the migration. But we straight away were able to see some key benefits. Firstly, people who were able to access the enterprise warehouse were very limited on the on-prem versus now it unlocked completely new audience for us, including our partners on data science, marketing, sales, etc. Secondly, it gave us a platform in which we were able to split our warehousing into a raw layer as well as reporting layer. So what that did for us was we were able to distribute and scale the platform more efficiently and in a more cost-optimized fashion. Third big win that came from us migrating was the way we were able to offer the reports and the data to our stores. Because ultimately, for any retail, and I'm sure you know some of you guys who are in retail, for us, the bread and butter is how much we sell. So ultimately, we were able to make the data accessible on time, what the store partners wanted to more than 1,500 stores.
Fantastic, thank you. Christian.
I can probably spend the next 46 minutes to tell about our story, how everything started and where we are right now, but I'm trying to just summarize it. So we started more or less in 2020, where we said, okay, we need to have an additional cloud data warehouse, which is a complementary solution to our existing data and AI infrastructure. So we started really with a small PO, just trying out Snowflake, how can it help us to work with data in a cloud-based setup. So where we are coming from is one of the biggest SAP cloud data, SAP on-premise warehouses with a 50 terabyte in-memory cluster. And we said, okay, let's use Snowflake additionally in case we would like to work with data in a cloud-based scalable infrastructure to enable also AI use cases and so on. So this was our first thought in 2020. And then we tried it out and we were really, let's say, surprised and was overwhelming about the functionalities and scalability which have been offered. And we got a lot of pressure also from our business to, let's say, innovate our ecosystem. So with, let's say, all the business demands we had, so how to work with data, having the possibility to work with the semi-structured, unstructured, and also structured data. Also with the competitive pressure, we decided then, okay, let's start with Snowflake and scale this up. So instead of having a complementary solution with Snowflake, we decided to really migrate our existing on-premise infrastructure in our on-premise data center completely to Snowflake. This decision was, of course, quite challenging for us because at Siemens we have a lot of security requirements, so we need to go through all these processes to also have the approval to store all the data in a cloud-based setup. In the end, we achieved it, so we could finally migrate everything to Snowflake. We have more than 2,500 developers in the meanwhile working on Snowflake. We have around 800 projects on Snowflake which are working with data. They're from all these different business lines, so we are really decentralized organization. We have a corporate IT department and also business IT, and the business were working with data. And this was a huge migration project in the end, about 1 year. And now we have all these projects migrated. Some of them are still on-premise, and they will migrate quite soon. And with this new setup right now, we have, let's say, a new way of working with data, a completely new setup. Of course, a lot of change management was required. But in the meanwhile, we have most or the majority of all the workloads already up and running productively in Snowflake.
Excellent, excellent. And how many ERPs did you combine onto Snowflake?
Yeah, this was one of the most challenging topics we had. So how can we replicate 50 ERP systems with around 50,000 tables in real time to Snowflake? This was one of the most critical factors. Right now, we are able to replicate all these 50 ERP systems. In addition to all the ERP and structured data, which was one of the main use cases we had in the past, doing some standard reporting on top of structured data, we now have also the possibility to combine it with unstructured data from all these different domains. So we are a manufacturing company, but of course we have sales, finance, logistics, procurement, legal, tax, P&O. So all these different domains are working with the ERP data, but now also integrate further data sources to Snowflake. And of course, with the new capabilities right now, they can really, let's say, create also new opportunities.
Excellent, excellent. So continuing down that line, you had mentioned tons of integration, tons of analytics. There are other tools that you're using in addition to Snowflake. So Christian, maybe you could just continue and tell us a bit about your broader stack and some of the other tools that you use.
Yeah. So sometimes we're saying we have almost everything, right? So as data and analytics department, we need to serve all the requirements we have from business IT, but also from a corporate IT perspective. So in the end, we have a lot of data integration tools to replicate on the one hand side ERP data, structured data, but also unstructured, semi-structured data. We have a lot of self-service offerings. So just to name a few, we have Alteryx, we have Talent, we have Nime, and so on, which are used for integrate data. We have also streaming offerings for real-time data integration. But of course, we also leverage the entire AWS stack for data integration using Glue, using Lambda, using Kinesis, and so on. And this really depends. In the end, our goal is to work in platform ecosystems with a lot of self-service capabilities so that also business IT and also new use cases can easily integrate data on their own and do not rely only on the corporate IT department. This was more the integration part, so all the data sources, but of course we also have a lot of end users. So with our setup, we are serving around 100,000 end users who are consuming the data which is on Snowflake. So for these end users, we offer a lot of reporting and front-end tools, process mining tools, but also data and AI tools. And here we are again leveraging mainly the AWS stack, but also from some other cloud providers.
Excellent, excellent. And Yush, what does your stack look like?
Yeah, I think similar to Christian, right? We are just like any other large enterprise. We are multi-cloud setup, and that's one advantage. We see as Snowflake being cloud agnostic. You can have any cloud that works seamlessly on Snowflake. So for us, we have strong AWS presence, S3. We have real-time streaming happening through Kafka. We do have Lambda, just like Christian mentioned on his side. We also have some legacy Python scripts running, which are now getting replaced, rationalized with the dbt for transformations. We do have cron jobs, again, some legacy framework, which I'm sure most of you may relate to, which is slowly getting transformed to Airflow for orchestration. On the data science side of things, we do leverage Vertex AI for running our comprehensive set of models. On a cloud warehouse, enterprise warehouse is Snowflake. Similar to Christian's use case, we do cater across the board to 25,000 employees within the company for reporting analytics need. We mainly use two tools, MicroStrategy and Looker for that.
Excellent, excellent. So Yush, maybe you can continue. I would love to hear a bit more about the key use cases that you've unlocked at Petco and maybe some of the business impact of these types of use cases.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Firstly, I would focus on the data sharing part of it. We, using Snowflake, are able to get extensive set of data sharing with a lot of external partners. What that does is that we necessarily don't have to copy over data from their side to our side. Some of the examples there are around your DoorDash, in which we are able to get the shipping information from their side to us so we can complement our use cases. Secondly, around Nielsen, that gives us the sales volume that we are seeing at the stores level, so we can accordingly modulate our volumes and take actions accordingly. Third one is Mix Panel, which gives us the customer browsing history, how they're coming on our sites, how much time they're spending, what are they spending time on, et cetera, et cetera. Other use cases are around AccuWeather, in which we get to know the weather, how that impacts the customer sales, how we can then modulate our course of action looking at the weather. COVID, as we all know, impacted most of the industries, impacted retail for sure. That was one of the inbounds to us as well. So yeah, those are like dozen inbounds, outbounds we have in play. Second use case that we have recently unlocked is Streamlit. Again, Streamlit is like a new thing that Snowflake has bring to power. In a nutshell, it offers a capability for our business partners to deploy an app quickly for their needs on top of the Snowflake Data Cloud. Going back to business values, I can talk about three main business values there. One being around supply chain team. They were able to create this application using Streamlit for them to see the change monitoring tool. In other words, what impacts does replenishment bring on a daily basis at the store level? So accordingly, they can modulate their course of action. Second goes around merchandising team. Again, using Streamlit, they were able to create a ledger to summarize the data at the supplier level. Just like any other big retailer, we have multiple suppliers at different levels, diamond, gold, silver, etc. For us to be in a power to see what is the catalog offered by them and for us to negotiate in a better fashion, this is like a game-changing app for us. Thirdly, for marketing team, in which we are able to have a better handle and real-time monthly forecasting.
Excellent, excellent. Christian, how about you? I know you touched on some of the use cases from an ERP perspective. We'd love to learn more.
Yeah, in the end, I think it's important that we, as corporate IT department for data analytics, we really are thinking in platform ecosystem. So we would like to provide this entire platform in a self-service way. So we have a marketplace, an internal marketplace or shop where everyone can just easily request access to a Snowflake project. So you just go there to a web shop, you order something, you provide charging information, and you get out of the box in just a couple of minutes a pre-configured Snowflake project. Not just Snowflake, but also dbt Cloud, CI/CD pipelines, everything secure with the framework surrounding it. This enables Siemens to really scale up Snowflake as well, because on the one hand side, they can all access structured ERP data and work with data and implement the use cases. And they can do this in a really self-service mode. So it's not that we always implement all these use cases on behalf of our customers. We really provide this solution for them in a scalable, let's say, way so that this is easily for them to use it. And now what we have seen is, so we are coming from an on-premise world. I already touched this topic quickly. The main use cases have been from sales and finance for standard reporting use cases. Now we see a lot of new opportunities. For example, in the manufacturing domain, we can now work, for example, with iceberg tables. So a lot of data is already on S3. Now they can combine it with, for example, structured data, which is already on Snowflake. They also see the benefits right now of, let's say, our data sharing capabilities we have. So we have a lot of data sharing capabilities implemented to share data between these different use cases. So here we have a lot of new, let's say, ways how to work with data. In the end, all these different domains have, let's say, other requirements. For example, P&O, which is for us people and organization, was a new domain. We have not worked intensively with them together in the past. Now, with the new setup we have implemented, they are now suddenly able to really integrate all the P&O data quickly, easily. They have a lot of features, for example, dynamic masking, which they apply for the PII data. So this brings a lot of opportunities for them to work right now in a cloud-based setup also with PO data. We are right now really at a starting point. So we are coming from, let's say, 400 to 500 projects on-premise. We thought about let's migrate them one by one to Snowflake. Thought about having the same amount of projects on Snowflake. Now we have around 800 already. So we see also that this is adopted or really used by all our teams quite intensively because they see now these opportunities which are coming. And I think really important here was that we achieved to get also these approvals. So this was for us really a game changer, especially from a cybersecurity point of view. We have a single account setup at Snowflake. The single account setup with this 800 projects is, let's say, approved from a cybersecurity point of view to store all data. So these teams do not have to worry about how they can ingest data, is this approved and so on. So they can really focus right now on the value, on the use cases. They can easily integrate it also the other solutions like AI solutions. And this just works out of the box. So now we're coming more into this value-driven approach to create value with the use cases instead of worrying all the time about opening firewalls, taking care of all the security processes. So it's a different way of how to work with data.
Excellent, excellent. So you had talked about some of the collaboration points and the external data that you're either incorporating into your Snowflake or the data that you're sharing externally. I am curious about either through the deployment and through the collaboration, some of the challenges that you've faced.
Yeah. Can I say Snowflake has been perfect? Not really, right? Definitely, we faced some challenges, right? First, which I've seen in my past, not just at Petco, but even before. Getting on cloud sounds quite, for lack of a better word, sexy, right? But we all know who have been in the cloud. It comes with some challenges, especially around TCO, total cost of ownership. For us, that became a challenge very quickly as well, Adam, in which we were able to get all this magic happen on the data cloud, in which we were able to exponentially grow. Just to put some data-backed stats here, we have more than 900,000 queries happening on Snowflake every year. Similar to Christian's use case, we have more than 450 unique active users in Snowflake at any point of time. We are dealing with more than 500 terabytes of data. So we are dealing with like enormous amount of data set here. So all that is great, but then if you start to bleed on the cost, that creates a nightmare very quickly for a company. So for us, that became a challenge quickly, but then we were able to get a handle quickly, partnership with Snowflake again. Few things, and you could be wondering, okay, Yush, how did you make it happen? So few things that I can suggest, or what I've seen happen in a nice fashion there is that we were able to split the warehouses in the optimal fashion. Secondly, we were able to optimize the workloads that we were ingesting. Thirdly, we were able to get the best practices on compressing the large files. Fourthly, that kind of became popular internally. We had a user board / shame board in which we will publicize the internal users who are using the most number of credits, and then we will go work with them on a change management aspect on how we can train them further to use the queries in a more optimal fashion. Fifthly, we are also having a real-time dashboards which can track the burn rate we have on a daily basis. So rather than waiting for a week or months, couple of months, we can literally on a daily basis see how the burn rate is going on. So that was one challenge that we were able to solve. Second was around the APIs. So as we all know, that becomes a use case very quickly. How do we, outside of data sharing, right? Because not all the partners would be willing to do data sharing or clean data room because of multiple reasons that we can talk separately. But then API becomes a need very quickly, right? The moment you come to API, two things come into play again, the response time and the cost. Again, that became a challenge when we started using our APIs to flow from Snowflake, and then we had to customize, work with the engineers from Snowflake to optimize that as well.
Excellent. Christian.
Yeah, so we also faced, of course, many challenges because the technology itself is not the challenge. Everyone loves to work with Snowflake, so this is also something we have seen. So it's super easy to use. We have also new capabilities working with Python, for example, no longer SQL. The teams do not have to worry about opening firewalls and so on, so it's just much more easier. In the past, it was only possible to connect via OData to our on-premise database to get data out. Now, if you're talking to data scientists that they need to open firewalls and then connect via OData to an on-premise system to getting a large amount of data to scale their data models and so on, this does not work anymore. One of the main, well, we had several issues or challenges, of course. One of the biggest challenges was initially, but we touched the topic already, data replication. So we work with many different providers. How can we replicate 50 ERP systems real-time to Snowflake? This was a challenge for us. Finally, we found a partner to replicate now all this data in real time. So this was, let's say, the prerequisite to start working with Snowflake. Then the second challenge was having 500 projects on premise with distributed teams who all work with data with a lot of dependencies between all these projects. How can we migrate them all to Snowflake in just 1 year? Because this was our time frame. We wanted to have this done in 1 year. So we needed to work really with them all together, how we can, let's say, migrate them in an efficient way. And here, I would say change management was really key. So a lot of communication, a lot of education, teaching them, explaining them what we're actually doing. So we have weekly calls, Q&A sessions. We have thousands of wiki pages. We have My Learning World where we really explain how the setup works. So this was for us really important to really explain how this setup can be used. And then, of course, after we have done all these things, another challenge was cost. And I think many of you were reading blog posts and so on. You see that Snowflake can be expensive. So we migrated, and the migration was quite often for these projects just one-by-one migration without refactoring and everything. So we migrated many projects to Snowflake. The good thing is that we already had some cost savings just by migrating without some refactoring, and we had cost savings of around 10%, plus the additional benefits, which are hard to quantify. These 10% were already quite nice. So business was actually already super happy. So you have now a new cloud-based setup. It's easily to work with it, and we have some cost savings. But we thought maybe there's some more, let's say, room for improvement. Maybe we can further reduce the cost. So we also thought about how can we further optimize our compute more or less on Snowflake, the warehouses which we are using, how we are ingesting data and so on. And then we also could improve for some data models the cost and reduce the overall cost by 99.9%. So this was really amazing to see how we can reduce the cost on some data models really dramatically instead of our on-premise infrastructure. So we have a lot of cost savings as well. So on the one hand side, we have seen some challenges, but the good thing is we could always find some solutions, also with the support of Snowflake, and of course also by the platform team who is monitoring all the time what these different distributed teams are doing, and then also to share with them best practices, how refactoring should be done, to create also synergies between these teams.
Excellent, excellent. So let's transition over a bit to machine learning and AI, and even starting to get towards Gen AI. I would love to hear about how you're thinking about it. So ML and AI have been around for a long time. I would love to hear a bit about kind of how are you using that today to drive your business? So not so much yet around the large language models, but more about traditional ML and AI. Christian, do you want to start with that?
Yeah. So in the past, it was for us, so we are using AWS quite intensively at Siemens. We had a huge platform which was mainly running on EC2 instances to get data then out via OData from our on-premise ecosystem. And then we started to work with machine learning use cases and then calculated some results, put them back with write-back functionalities, put them back to our on-premise database. Right now, what we are doing is we leverage, on the one hand side, the hyperscaler offerings. We're using SageMaker, we're using Bedrock, we're using also the integrated functionalities of Snowflake to work with machine learning. So we're exploring also Snowpark, also looking into the future, the container service, what we can leverage. So there are many things we're doing right now. And of course, we have many different use cases. So we are, for example, getting all the data out of Snowflake, calculating next best actions for our sales agents, for example. calculating this, writing it back to Snowflake, then creating also data products out of it to share this with other organizations. So there are a lot of different use cases we have with, let's say, more traditional machine learning. But right now we are, of course, also exploring new use cases with generative AI to increase further the productivity. So we're having a lot of chatbots right now. We have conversational search, where really business users can ask questions, natural language processing, then we're translating them into queries on Snowflake. We're getting the results back, we're translating them again and pushing the results. So there's a new way of working with data. Of course, this is still in an early stage for us, so we're exploring right now all these functionalities. But we see already that this will completely change the way of working, not just to, let's say, having a better user or customer experience, but also how to further increase the productivity on our side to generate automatically content, but also to use functionalities to automatically generate code. So we see there are a lot of potential also looking into the future.
Excellent. So Yush, last night at dinner, you and I were talking a lot about some of the ML models that you have already deployed that are live and impacting customers. Maybe we start with that. We share how you're actually using AI and ML today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of all the retailers I've worked with, I'm very proud to say our journey on traditional AI ML has been quite ahead of the curve, right? And I can state some of the models that we're currently using. So in case, some of you guys, if you want to concretely take away a few things, what is working good for us? One of the models is CLTV, customer lifetime value, which I'm sure most of us have heard. What that does is we're able to figure out the lifetime value at the customer level. That helps us not just how do we market at that level, but also figure out the best way to forecast and budget on our end. Second, complete the cart. Again, there are two different use cases for that. One around when the customer is making a purchase real time, we are able to figure out how close or how far they are from the free shipping. For them to get the free shipping, we then will create models that will pop up, hey, add this to your cart for you to qualify for the free shipping. Secondly, on the same model, we are able to look at the trends that they have done in the past. In other words, what they have bought in last 6 months, 12 months. Are they missing any products when they're ordering? So that becomes the second suggestion for us in the same model schema. Thirdly, being around the promotions. Again, very targeted promotions, not like our typical marketing cloud promotions in which everything goes to everyone. These are targeted promotions at the customer level, looking at their behavior from last, not just couple of weeks, but months, years of data. Again, that's where the AI models, the machine learning comes into great use in which no one has to manually go in and crunch this data, but the models are able to get trained on a multiple recurring cycles, and then from there, we are able to target them in the best possible fashion. Fourth model that we are also extensively using is the churn model. Very common again, what's the churn rate for us at the customer level again so we can then target the audience accordingly, number one. Secondly, we can then look at how we can position our budgets in the similar fashion. Fifthly, and again, we have more than a dozen models, guys. I'm just stating the top ones. The fifth being the cross-selling, again, very popular. The way we are making it work, usual typical retail use case is how do you upsell? In other words, when a customer is buying, in our example, some pet products, like for cat or for a dog, what makes sense to complement that product with what they already have in the cart? So that becomes our upselling models. And to go outside of this, we are also starting to leverage our CI/CD GitLab AI side of things, in which we are in the process of generating models so we can auto-program, auto-code deployments in the coming times.
Excellent, excellent. And if we continue on that, I would love to understand how you're thinking about generative AI. As I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of us are in the early stages and we're exploring and we're actually deploying. I know, Christian, you've got some actual live examples, but I'd love to hear how you're thinking about, in your role, generative AI and what the initial use cases will be.
Is that for me?
Yeah, that's for you, Yush.
Okay. So we are in the early stage of generative AI. At the same time, we are keeping in mind some of the considerations that we feel would be very relevant and applicable for any industry. Just to cite some of the things. One, how do you ensure the data is reliable and secured? I'm sure you guys have all heard of the instances where data got leaked or data was not reliable. If that foundational aspect is missing, then guess what? The model would never give the results you're looking for. Second, the data accountability and gatekeeping. In other words, how do you ensure the data that we are going to use for these large language models, deep learning, are accounted for? There's a gatekeeper that ensures right data is getting in, and the models are not just working off garbage data. Thirdly, around the transparency on these models. In other words, are these models transparent enough for us to know and action accordingly? You don't want to be in a black box setup in which model is spitting out something and we don't know or we don't have a handle of what is getting out. Fourthly, again, I think it became quite publicized around human touch to it. The models have to comply with a human centric touch as well, because that becomes critical. We cannot just rely blindly on a model, but we have to make sure someone is keeping that check in play.
Excellent, excellent. And you, Christian, how are you thinking about it?
Well, we're already using generative AI, but it's, I would say, mainly right now used for productivity increases, but also for some processes to further automate things. So, for example, external master data management, we are leveraging, for example, generative AI. Based on industry standards, we're creating the data model fully automatically. We are extracting data from PDFs and then populate these data models. And then we're creating data products to share them. So we see also that with generative AI, we can suddenly extract new data out of, let's say, unstructured, semi-structured data. In the past, we just stored them somewhere. And then, of course, manual work was required to get really insights out of the data. Right now, we really can see that we can leverage generative AI to create here new use cases. But I would totally agree. So it's a starting point right now. We're exploring many different things on all the hyperscalers. We're also exploring, of course, the Snowflake functionalities built in directly in Snowflake, where we also see a lot of potential because we do not have to first extract the data to somewhere else, but we can really work directly in the same platform, Snowflake, with generative AI. But here, it's really a starting point. We're looking forward to work on all these use cases, and let's see what we can do.
Excellent, excellent.
If I can complement that, Adam,
yes, absolutely.
I think some of the use cases we are looking at are one around post-production chat box. In other words, once the product is sold, how can we implement some chatbots which can help us address customer needs in a more optimized fashion? Second, looking at the content creation, especially catering to the social media commerce side of things, in which looking at the trend analysis, sentiments of the customers on social media, how do we then channel our content accordingly? Because I think all of us have realized now those mediums cannot be ignored anymore. The chats or the comms that are going on social media, such as your Facebook, Twitter, and it's tedious, right? If someone has to do that manually, that becomes a tricky task in itself. Thirdly, doing the market research, right? Complement to the second point on the content creation. We're looking at how we can further enhance, improve the way we are looking at market, how the market is trending, what is the market looking for, how do we then position ourselves in the same direction.
All right, so it's incorporating a lot of unstructured data and being able to make sense out of the unstructured data.
Correct, yes. It's going to be a combination, Adam, unstructured, structured, semi-structured. So yeah, making sense of everything which is out there and then putting some action behind that. Because it's one thing for us to just understand data, but then second, how do you implement and take a step further to take actions on it?
Excellent, excellent. So I think we're already starting to touch upon it. I am curious, what is the next step of your journey? So Christian, you had started talking about kind of the major ERP deployments and bringing that data into Snowflake and using that as kind of the foundation for analytics outside of the organization. I would love to hear kind of what's next in your journey.
Yeah, for us, what's really important right now, what we're discussing quite a lot is the way of how we work with data. So I touched this already in one of the previous questions. So the way of working with data for us, we would like to work really with data products in the future. We are already having a lot of concepts around it. So for us, not just data sharing and collaboration is really crucial in the future, but also internal data sharing. So what we have done is we have built a data sharing framework, which we call data as a service within Siemens, where we explore or where we provide a framework to easily create data products with a guided workflow to publish data products, to consume data products. So this is something what we are doing right now intensively. This means in the end, we have all the data on Snowflake. A data steward or data owner can easily, and we're using here Mendix as a low-code tool, which is connected to Snowflake. The data steward and data owner can easily use this tool to create a data product out of it, can describe it as well, can specify security policies like row-level security approvers, so who is allowed to see which data, and can publish this data product to our marketplace. So this is something we have implemented for internal data sharing, which enables the entire organization to work right now with data products, to also thinking about new concept like monetization. So how can we also monetize data within Siemens, but also externally? And this completely guided. So we would like to harmonize somehow the way of working with data, and this is something we're working right now intensively, and of course also leveraging the capabilities of Snowflake. So
if I could actually maybe double click into that comment. So when you talk about sharing of the data internally, I would love to learn a bit more about who are your customers, how are you thinking about that collaboration? You started off by introducing Siemens as an organization with many, many different business units. So who are the customers and how are you handling that collaboration?
Yeah, so in the past we had this monolithic ecosystem without any transparency who is, let's say, working with what kind of data. Right now, what we have implemented with Snowflake and also a data catalog and a data shop or marketplace on top, we have, let's say, lineage, we have full transparency, we enable all the business users or also IT users to explore which data is available, and everything is linked to each other. So it's not just that the developers are working with data on Snowflake and the business users are using the front-end tool, it's really that also different or new personas like business analysts can easily explore what data is available from which domains. They can go to our marketplace. This is the marketplace where you can also just ask for a new Snowflake project. This marketplace also offers data, so they can just go there, request access to, for example, sales data, then it's sent to approvers, and they can work with data. So in the end, it's really self-service for everyone within Siemens. It's not just, let's say, for specific developers, like our, 2,000 to 3,000 developers who are using Snowflake intensively. It's really for everyone who needs to have access to data to work with it. So the simple answer would be all domains, all users, different personas, from a developer, data scientist, but also to a business analyst who needs to have access to data, because this is also what we have as part of our vision, to grant everyone access to the right data with good data quality, so that they can easily work on their use cases.
Excellent. And Yush, I'd love to hear about what you're thinking about for the kind of the next set of investments and where you go from here from a data perspective.
Yeah, I think 3-4 main use cases, Adam. One, which I kind of touched upon, is taking the data sharing to the next level. So we are very actively looking at clean room from Snowflake. What that would unlock for us as a company would be not just needing to copy data for us to share, but also being able to share the data without sharing any PII or sensitive information, one. And second, getting to the most optimized and efficient fashion of sharing data across companies as big as, financial services giants. That makes sense between us as a retail giant and for them. So that's one. Second big thing that we are trying to unlock is around retail media. We are trying to look at monetizing our data, in which we're looking at the pet health wellness in a more 360 fashion, in which we're trying to build our ads, which are very catered towards the consumers that we are focused on. So rather than be giving the power and ownership to the third party, we will target our customers looking at the 360 view on all the data points and then monetize data accordingly. Thirdly, going back to one of the first comments on the ongoing journey of optimization, performance monitoring. We will absolutely continue our journey to keep optimizing our workloads because guess what? For any of us working for any size of corporates, data volumes only going to increase exponentially. So if we don't keep a good tap on optimizations, that will quickly start to bleed out of control.
Excellent, excellent.
I would like to add something here as well, because I touched mainly the internal data sharing, but I think what's also super interesting is how we collaborate with external, so external data sharing.
Yes.
So I mentioned we have built an internal data sharing framework, which is really guided, which makes it easy inside our organization to share data. But we also have, for example, Siemens Healthineers or Siemens Financial Services, where data sharing is required. Here we are also leveraging, for example, the private marketplace to share data, which makes it really easy. And the keynote, for example, of today, or was it yesterday, I don't remember, where zero ETL is always mentioned. So this is also something where we had a lot of issues in the past. So how can we easily replicate data? And right now with the zero ETL of Snowflake, to make it easy to just share data from one Snowflake account to the others, this is something what we really enjoy. It makes it super easy for us to share data. And this is also what we're exploring right now with startups. So how can we also share, for example, Siemens data with external startups using the private marketplace or also the public marketplace in the future to share data. So this is also something what we are really looking for and what we are already doing right now, mainly internally, but also right now with first use cases with startups.
So that's your ecosystem, I would say, or your internal business units.
Yes.
Whether it's Healthineers or Siemens Finance, but it's also your external customers or partners.
Exactly.
That you're looking to share data with.
Yeah, and here I think, because we're talking about data sharing is really important, but also what we're really looking forward to, we have not yet built on it, but we private preview customers using the container service. So building apps on Snowflake with our data and then selling it or sharing it with other, let's say, partners, customers, who can then benefit from what we have already built with their own data is something we really are working on right now to really explore also these new capabilities of collaboration, not just with data, but also with apps on top of the data. So this is also something which I think is really promising, but we can then also create new revenue streams by sharing, let's say, the apps we have built on top of our data, which is on Snowflake.
Excellent, excellent. I just want to touch upon what you have mentioned. So for those of you that are not familiar with a clean room or a Snowflake clean room, what that allows you to do is actually collaborate between two separate organizations and run queries against two different data sets without actually exposing the underlying PII data. So if you have an example with what you had mentioned within like a sharing data with another organization, you could actually, let's say, run advertising and develop campaigns without actually showcasing who your customers are or the advertiser showing who their customers are, but you can still run queries against that data.
Yeah, and I think the other beauty to that is that you can mask data at the column level. And thirdly, there's no copying required anywhere, right? Like you can share like gigabytes, terabytes, again, depending on the use case you guys have of data without needing to copy one row of data.
Excellent, excellent. So one more thing. So we talked a lot about, I would say, significant transformations within both of your organizations, whether it was within your organization moving from on-prem to cloud, or your organization kind of transforming the ERP systems, creating these data marketplaces. I am curious about the kind of change management that was required internally, whether it was not just kind of introducing individuals to a new way of working, but also whether or not you had to kind of up-level or develop or acquire new skill sets within the organization. So maybe we could touch upon a bit about that to close things out before moving to Q&A. So yeah, Yush, maybe we start with you on that one.
Yeah, change management, right? I think we all have seen that, that plays a big, massive role, especially when you are undertaking such a big migration. So we did a couple of things, right? One, we prepped our engineering data science teams upfront before we even did the migration to get equipped with how Snowflake in general work. Now, the thing that plays good in favor of this migration was anyone who knows SQL is almost well-equipped to start working in Snowflake from the word go. Obviously, there are some changes on formats, et cetera, as some of us know who are in the weeds. But the move from getting from the previous platform, someone knowing SQL to Snowflake became a seamless journey. The third step we did was for our business partners, so they are well equipped to start using Snowflake as well. We opened some training modules. Again, in multiple phases, before we went live, after we went live, and then depending on the skill sets, we created some power users across multiple departments, such as, we had some power users for marketing, some for sales. We got them into a different training schema versus other people who are more store-based. For them, it's more about writing simple queries, etc.
And you already had data scientists and data engineers on staff.
Yep.
Excellent. And Christian, how about you?
Yeah, for us it was really a lot of efforts for change management which was required. So on the one hand side, working with Snowflake itself was easy. But then when we introduced also dbt cloud, CI/CD pipelines with code reviews, for ICE principle, all these different security principles we need to implement, it was really important for us to provide a lot of training materials. So we had, on the one hand side, we have worked together with Snowflake, with AWS, with dbt. We're using dbt as development workbench to really have some trainings which are also, let's say, linked to our ecosystem so that it's really easy to understand how to work with this new setup. Weekly sessions, Q&A sessions, a lot of wikis which we have published. And then, of course, having also first-level support, second-level support, everything has been set up so that it's really easy for our end users to work now with this new environment. Here, of course, and here we can also now leverage generative AI because we have everything documented. All these videos are available, but still you get so many requests and questions, and you cannot answer all of them. So here we're also leveraging right now generative AI or AI itself, so that it's easier for someone just to ask a chatbot about specific setups on our Snowflake account. Which role must be used for do X activities? Is it possible? How is it possible to create a new data product? And everything is right now documented, but it's not really easily accessible. So here we're also working right now with chatbots to make it really easy for our end users. On the other hand, it was, of course, for us a challenge because of the migration itself. So we introduced a migration board, taking care that all these different stakeholders from all the business teams and also from the, let's say, distributed IT departments are always up to date, so that they also know and are familiar what's going on. So for us, it was really key to have a lot of transparency and to explain why we are doing it, what are the benefits, to really work closely together. So it was not just an IT decision from our side. Let's start working with Snowflake. It was more or less in the end a joint decision together with Siemens Smart Infrastructure, Siemens Mobility, Siemens Digital Industries. And in the end, we have, of course, all the boards like a steering board and so on, where we can then also jointly decide together on how to approach specific things, how to work with costs on a consumption-based model. It was also quite challenging. So in the past, we're coming from an on-premise infrastructure, fixed cost. So this was easily to be distributed between all these different projects. Now on Snowflake, charging on a monthly basis with consumption-based cost, this was quite challenging. So how can we also approach these things? And this was of course, also important for us to share this already in advance, how to also estimate cost, how to forecast cost. And this is where we spend a lot of time and energy to really educate how to work with this new setup, so that it's easier for our end users. And after now 1 year, consumption-based is no longer discussed within Siemens. This is now the new normal, I would say. Of course, things are sometimes, so costs are sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but in the end, with monitoring, with dashboards, and with a lot of transparency, this really works for everyone.
Excellent.
And also our financial department now learned how to work with consumption-based models. So this is also something we achieved where we are quite happy. So here also some education was required, but finally we found a solution.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well, I definitely appreciate both of your time to come out here, share your stories. I love hearing about the retail use cases and how Snowflake is relevant to a retailer, both in terms of brick and mortar as well as online, and then from a Siemens perspective as a manufacturer, the different ways that you're thinking about Snowflake and how it started to transform your business. And so I'm very excited to watch the ongoing journey ahead of both of you. So thank you for the time.
Thank you.
So I think we're pretty much at time. Again, we'll be here to answer questions if anybody wants to chat with us afterwards. Thank you for coming to our session. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.